This is DUNE TALK, a DUNENewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's show. We've been to the DUNE IMAX Reissue and watched an amazing 10-minute preview of DUNE Part 2 featuring the Sandworm ride, and it's time for reactions. This is Marcus, your friendly editor at DUNENewsNet.com, and I'm here with two more of the DUNE Talk regulars.
Hey everyone, it's Johnny Sobchak here again. It's the middle heat of Dune season, it feels like, or at least getting close to it. Really excited to discuss what we saw at the special event. And tickets are on sale now. It seems like there's an ad or social media post every day. People are talking about it online. It's just a great feeling, great time, and really excited.
Hey everyone, Simon Dowdy back. I know, look different. I've been busy. But like Johnny said, super excited. I feel like every time I open Twitter/X, there's some new Dune little clip or something telling me to go buy my tickets.
Great, let's talk DUNE Part 2 sneak peek.
Dune Movie News.
So this past Wednesday, DUNE Part 1 returned to select IMAX locations across the United States and Canada for one night only. At the end, viewers were treated to a sneak peek just over 10 minutes at DUNE Part 2. Note that similar events will also be held at many international territories between February 7 and 9. As usual, check DUNENewsNet.com for our list of countries and dates. So first of all, great to rewatch Dune on an IMAX screen once again, 2 years after original release, right? And every shot, it just contains so much details, and the big screen is just such an incredible way to take in those visuals and sounds. Something was different this time, though. Before the movie started, there was a message from Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, and just reminding audiences, stay seated until the end. And then, of course, after the credits rolled, it was what we were all waiting for, a big screen preview of Dune Part 2. First, a Sizzle Reel, which had a mix of scenes where we've previously seen from the trailers, as well as a bunch of brand new shots, intercut with commentary from Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, and Rebecca Ferguson. So let's talk about some of the new shots and like any other takeaways you got from seeing those previous shots as well on big screen. Simon, you want to kick off?
Sure. It was so fast. I mean, that sizzle was probably under 2 minutes. I get that the main focus was the 10-minute clip that we're going to be talking about, but it was nice to see more of like the cast behind the scenes. I personally would like to seen like hours of that stuff, but that's just me because I want to see more of Dune 2. I think the biggest thing was what we actually got to see in the 10-minute clip that impressed me the most, because it was such a bunch of fast scenes. We saw the scene with the Baron, I think, in the beginning again, when he's on Arrakis, when he's floating, that we've seen in the trailer. But I don't recall any major scenes that stood out in my mind from the little sizzle in the beginning.
Yeah, I would say in terms of the sizzle itself, before we get to the worms section, it was very quick. It was very much in the introduction before the main sequence. We kind of got some snippets of like behind the scenes footage mixed in with footage from the film, and also, of course, some interviews and quick comments from the cast. And Denis Villeneuve had a great little introduction as well. But yeah, we got some great new shots of Arrakis, Arrakeen. It just it's not anything radically different, I think, than what we've really seen so far, but it was very, very cool. Getting to see more, I think, of like the Fremen culture, some of the sieges, things of that nature. And then, the way they kind of led it into this overall, that opening sizzle reel, I would say, really emphasized the action and the intensity and the scale of everything that we're going to be getting in this movie, which is totally amped up from the first one. And I think that was a perfect kind of setting the scene in terms of, what you can expect from the movie, but also what we were going to see in the elongated sequence of the worm riding. And getting to hear the cast talk, it's really the first time we've heard them talk at length, I feel. We've gotten little quotes here and there in the media, Austin Butler doing interviews and stuff like that. But for them to be sitting down specifically talking about the movie, it was great to kind of get some of that more behind the scenes type of a segment and, stuff that you find on the Blu-ray, months after the movie comes out, things like that. I'm looking forward to more of that. I'm sure we'll get plenty between now and the release. But yeah, I feel like that was really a good setting for it. And then Villeneuve just kind of really pitching the movie really well, really hard to the audience, which the people that were there watching it probably don't need all that much convincing, especially by the way, things went overall. I will also add that frankly, and I know we're talking about the new footage, but if they hadn't had any new footage or anything special, I still would have been there to watch part one because it was incredible to see it again in IMAX. It was like watching it for the first time. I feel like I could appreciate it in a whole new way. And I hadn't seen it. I purposely waited because I figured they would do a re-release. And so getting to see it after, over, I think a year, maybe a year and a half of not watching it was pretty great. And I think it was also a great kind of palate cleanser in terms of like your expectations. Cause like you're really dialing into like what the first movie was in every little scene and overall, its energy, it's the music, the effects. And I think that's what made the worm riding sequence that we got to see just even more impactful is because there is a different energy, a different quality to it, even though it's very much the same world, the same filmmaker, all the same elements. It's got something extra to it. And I just feel like if that's any indication of the rest of the movie, and we're going to go into more detail here in a moment, I think the movie is really going to be special. And I've been saying that for a long time. I do think that all things considered, it does have every opportunity or possibility to surpass what we got in part one.
I agree with Johnny. It was great seeing it again. And as much as I haven't seen it in probably good 6-7 months or even a year. I mean, I see it often when I'm editing, the show, grabbing stills, but really sitting down and watching it, and especially in IMAX, I remember it being big, but the scale, like some of the shots, like the ships and like even just the desert scenes. It's just amazing what Greg Fraser and the team did on that. And just, I still got goosebumps. Look, I'll be the first one to admit there's some scenes where I cried. Like when Leto's like, I wish we had more time. There's a tear coming down. Look, I go through the range of emotions. I get happy. I get sad when I watch it. And it was great seeing it again a couple of weeks before we get to see part two. And I kind of did the same thing, Johnny. I didn't want to watch it on like TV or whatever because I knew it was going to be re-released. We were hoping for that, and it was kind of a great welcome back to Arrakis for a little bit and refresh our mind about it.
Yeah, I think, Johnny, maybe you had mentioned that on X about how we've had already three big size trailers, and there's still so much that we haven't seen yet. And in the Sizzle Reel itself, because I was taking quick notes, I think there was at least like maybe 8 or more shots that we hadn't seen before, mixed with the other shots, and that there was certainly a couple that stood out. But the Sizzle Reel itself, it starts with we hear the thumper sounds, and then first you see one thumper, and then you're zooming out, and then you see that there's a lot of thumpers, it's spread out, and like that can only mean one thing, like they're calling all those worms over, and they're gonna be heading towards Erkine. That's probably like really like towards the end of the movie.
Yeah, no, I definitely know. I thought that was a great way to introduce it, Marcus. I'm glad you pointed that out. Because just the
Totally
implication
forgot
of what
about
that
that.
means. Yeah, just the implication of seeing so many thumpers in one spot. You're just like, wow, this is really going to be something special. And you're right. We did see, again, there was a lot of similar footage, maybe new shots that were just slightly different or like just before or after something we've already seen, especially some of the action sequences. But yeah, I mean, the few truly new stuff we did get to see was very exciting and kind of alluded to some stuff. I feel like maybe I'm sure we will see some of these shots. And I think we already have in just the last couple of days, some quick glimpses of these shots before the movie comes out. But I feel like maybe, I almost think that maybe because they know that these are like the hardcore fans that are going to be there, like they were willing to show a little bit extra in terms of, not caring about certain things like down the line towards the end of the movie. Cause there are some epic and dark looking, and dark, I mean like violent and sinister seeming, shots, especially with, just the big battle that's going to take place at the end of this movie. And the infiltration of Eriki and all these different things that are going to happen that we've already gotten some glimpses of. Lots of blood, lots of dirt, lots of worms. Um, and it just looks great. As you said, Simon, Greg Fraser, he obviously won the Oscar for part one. And just the more we see this movie, I'm like, wow, like I don't know how they managed to really just raise the bar and just, hey, you think you can get better than part one, but lo and behold, here we are. And it just looks like they've expanded. They've taken things that they felt like they maybe could improve on or expand upon from the first one. And I just think that they did have done something really special just off the little bit that we've seen, on top of the trailers, of course. But I will say there was a really cool, this isn't even plot related whatsoever, but just as an image that popped out in my head when I saw it was a new shot of Getty Prime where, and this is actually in some of the recent clip that came out online. So you can find a image of it. It basically is like, at first I thought it was an explosions like, oh, wow, like Getty Prime, is this under attack? Like what's going on? But it's after you look at it a couple of times, it's clearly fireworks going on. And it's like nighttime, but it's also like, is it black and white? Because the fireworks are kind of white looking. So it's just such a cool visual. And I'm excited. The thing that I like about that the most that stood out to me, apart from the actual visual, is getting more Getty Prime, getting more Harkonnens, getting more of that culture, that life on that planet. Because, we only had a couple instances of showing up on Getty Prime in the first movie. And a lot of it was interior, indoors. Now we know we have the gladiator scene. There's probably going to be some sort of celebration, after. It just looks very cool. I'm excited that we're getting some more of that, in addition to all the amazing things that we're seeing on Arrakis, of course. Yeah, it's just, as someone who's rereading the book right now, and I haven't even gotten to the parts of this movie. Like I'm mostly in part one still. I'm getting there, but it just, all these things are coming to my mind. I'm like, wow, like they're really going like for it all, I feel. And I think that especially the scale of the action, and we're talking about the Sandworm here, but just the actual battles and hand-to-hand combat and long shots and close-ups, and it all just looks like, I know Villeneuve isn't known for like being an action director, and I know some people have been critical like how part one was handled in some respects. I thought overall it was done pretty well, but I just feel like knowing how much that he has to do in this movie, I feel like he's really trying to sharpen his abilities in that regard. And I feel like it's already showing up in just like the little bit we've seen. We've seen the charging in the battle. We've seen some of the more epic like shots with the worms and whatnot, but I just feel like there's a lot again still that people have not seen. And the few glimpses we got of that also were one of the main things that stood out, especially the color and the lighting and the nighttime stuff that's going on. How many people are on the ground? Like obviously a lot of it is CG or integrated with CG, but yeah, it's just a whole new ball game. It feels like, even though it is so similar in building on part one. And obviously the worm ride that we're about to talk about, like that is one of the things that I'd say maybe more than anything else is going to be built upon and used so much compared to the first one. Cause we only got a couple of real glimpses or maybe three encounters with a worm in part one. And the worms seem like they're going to be a everyday occurrence, every scene occurrence in this movie, which I don't think any Dune fans will be complaining about.
Touching on just a couple of those brand new scenes. So John, you had called out, we see the fireworks over Getty Prime. So that's probably like the celebration after, Feyd has won in the arena, and, he's been announced as the heir to the Harkonnens. We also saw a shot of two Harkonnen harvesters under attack. There was a shot of the Emperor's ship. It's, above Eriki, flying over there, probably going to the plains to land and set up the base there. We see an intimate moment between Paul and Chani. So that's probably like a bit, towards the middle of the film when they really have a full relationship. We also see one shot of Paul lying on the floor of the desert. It's unclear if he's like waking up there or something's happened. It could be a vision. And we got a different angle of Chani riding on the Sandworm. So like really a lot happening in just those flashes. But I think the one that I do want to touch on and spend a bit of time on before we go to the Sandworm ride is there's one shot of what appears Jessica walking in a siege room. I'm assuming it's a room in a siege, and she's going to be their religious leader, so she's going to have a really nice room in siege. There's decorations. But she's walking around, and it clearly looks like she's pregnant in that shot. I mean, it could just be me, like from what I've seen forever, but her positioning and the size of her stomach. So yeah, like again, I want to say, like I've just seen the question out there so many times. Is Alia in the movie? Yes, she is in the movie. But yeah. So what were your guys' thoughts on that shot, or if you want to jump on the other ones?
Well, Marcus, we got a chance to see it together, and my first reaction was like, "Where's Aaliyah in the Sizzle reel?" But I didn't notice the Jessica stomach then. I would like them to release that footage maybe in a couple of weeks, so we can see it again. But I think it's super interesting that you noticed that. Um, Aaliyah will definitely be in the movie. Denise not gonna show her, sadly. We're so close, so far. It's like almost Christmas. We're almost opening our present, and I think he wants to keep Aaliyah a secret for non-book fans and even 84 fans. By the way, the 84 movie is getting released again. People get a chance to see it in theater. I know I'm going. It's gonna be interesting to see that in the big screen. But that's a really interesting shot. I like I said, I totally was overwhelmed just by all the new shots and everything. Good memory, Marcus.
Yeah, that moment, it didn't stand out to me as far as pregnancy is concerned, just because it was such a quick glimpse in her body position and what she's wearing. Like, it's hard to see. I can definitely understand though that thinking. Frankly, I don't know. I guess the fact of the matter is, like, we know she's pregnant because she says so in part one. So I'm not really like thinking that in depth about it. Like, I would imagine her stomach's going to be showing at some point in part two. I mean, it would make sense. I guess the big question is, we don't know when, or I guess if she's going to give birth during this movie. Presumably she is. The thing is, we, as far as we can tell, at least being book readers and seeing all the footage that we have, I don't know how late Jessica shows up, like where she's at during the second half of the movie, or like the final third of the movie, for example. Because everything we've seen from the big battle and what's happening at the very end and the duel with Feyd and Paul, as far as anyone has pointed out, I haven't seen Jessica in any of that. Obviously, I would say maybe the latest appearance that she's made that we know for sure would be like where she's talking to him on the rocks and she has the face tattoos, and um, that seems like it's right maybe before they go to battle, or perhaps at some later date or something. I'm not really sure, but that, and obviously we don't see her full body in that image, but yeah, I mean, she's pregnant for sure, and we know that we're getting a child one way or another. Just a matter of, and that's what I love about part two compared to part one already. Is I feel, and I've heard other people say this, and I was talking to my friend about it the other night after we saw the footage. Part one, you could kind of, as if you've read the book, you could kind of like parse out, like, okay, it's probably going to end around here. It's going to have to do this, this, and this. You have to explain this, set that up. Um, Now we still know that there's certain plot points, characters, events that they're gonna have to do in this movie and where it's gonna end, quote unquote. But I feel like there's just so much more mystery in terms of the structure and like maybe different creative liberties they could take with it. Um, and a lot of room for like interpretation and artistic freedom. So I think there's just a lot of fun that's going to come from this movie. And I think we're already seeing that in the footage that we're seeing. I think that we're seeing Villeneuve really kind of without any restraints and really just, I think he knows that Messiah is probably going to happen. Yeah, all like, I think all likelihood is pointing toward that. And I think he just really wants to like tee it up well and like have people in love with this movie and be willing or open to watching a third one potentially, with that option, and knowing that Messiah is going to be a very different kind of movie. I think we're just going to get, everything and then some with this one, which is great. And all those shots and everything from the worm stuff to the Feyd stuff, getting primed to Jessica just in a room, standing or pacing back and forth. Like, there's so much that you can read into or like analyze. And I think that's great. And I know that we're going to do that once the movie's out, obviously.
Well, let's not forget also Jessica does take the water of life. So there could be scenes where we don't see her, where she's in her water of life type of coma. And uh, in the book, I don't remember, but I know in the 84 movie, they make clear that there is a time jump. So maybe the movie starts off right after part one, and then we see the rise of Paul becoming Muad'Dib and the love story with him and Chani grow, because spoilers, there's not one birth. There could be two births if we know what we're talking about with Chani and Paul. So that's going to be important too. So maybe Jessica does get to spend time with Alia, takes care of her, and maybe every shot with Jessica in the movie later she is with Alia. So it's it's trailer trickery, like how they're hiding her. Because when we were watching the Sandworm scene, I was like, wait, where's Jessica? She should worry about her son. But then I was like, maybe she's recovering from the water of life. And we don't know how early. And I want to see the Sandworm scene has to be halfway through the movie because of Paul and Johnny relationship looks like, they're actually together, the headband. And
Mhm.
like me and Johnny, I know we talked about this. In the first movie, Johnny does not care about Paul. She does not give an F about him. Like, just a little boy. Like, go away. I hope you die honorably. So we have to create that. And it seems like from some interviews I've seen also that Chani doesn't trust Paul as the Messiah, the Muad'Dib. And that's something I love, that she's going to have to be like, he is the chosen one. He is the Kwisatz Haderach. So it's going to take time. It's not going to be like, oh, Paul, I love you right away.
Yeah, and she called it out in like in her comments that she loves to see those sort of, I think she described it as conflicted characters, like that they're in between a lot of different things, or her love for Paul and like her loyalty to her people. So I think as we discussed in the previous episodes, we're going to see a lot of that conflict within Shani, and how that's expressed in terms of her going against prophecy and yeah, maybe not fully trusting him. So then, as we've alluded to, it was the big scene that Denis Villeneuve introduced, and he talked about how as a boy, as a young reader, he dreamt of that scene of Paul riding the Sandworm for the first time, and then indeed we got to see that whole scene. I think it must have been about 5 to 6 minutes. And we had already seen maybe like 1 minute, 1.5 minutes based on the trailer footage, but yeah, seeing the whole thing on screen, that was amazing. Like, I will hand it over to you, Johnny. Like, what were your thoughts, like seeing that screen scene in full?
Ugh, yeah, it was a lot. It was, I like you, Marcus and Simon. I feel like we would have been happy to see anything, of course, but um, I think, as you said in the trailer, we do get some glimpses of the scene, so you kind of have some idea. As a book reader, obviously, you kind of know how it's going to go, but um, it was what we expected in that sequence. But what I didn't expect, and kind of what I alluded to earlier, is that the movie, and I said this as soon as I got out, because it was just, I was so like, not surprised, but like it just very much imprinted on me the fact that the movie is going to be different in some significant ways to part one. I feel like this movie, it's just going to be a different energy. Villeneuve is just going to be kind of doing whatever he wants, because he knows that he doesn't have to play it safe to try and get another movie greenlit. Obviously, he wants to do Messiah, but it's not like there's a third part of Dune, the original novel. And so in this scene, we enter into the scene and it's just quiet. It's like all you can hear is the sand rustling and some people like moving around, and you hear the conversation, and they're doing the sand walk up the dune. Um, and immediately I just felt like, I was like, wow, like this is just so, because we just watched part one. So it's like, you've been rattled for like 2.5 hours with Hans Zimmer's score, and like the attack on Arrakeen, and like the sand harvester and the sandworm sequence, and like Caladan, like moving from Caladan to Arrakis, and Getty Prime being introduced, and the Baron. And like, there's all these crazy things that happen, and it's loud, and it's like super like visually like arresting. And then all of a sudden, like, you're in the desert and it's quiet, and there's this conversation happening, and it's just such a different energy, so impressive. And it felt like restrained in a lot of ways. And that's how it starts out. And that's really how it goes through like the first half of the scene, because the first half of the scene is all the build up to the worm ride itself. And I thought that it was just such a great build up. You get these really fun like character moments between the Fremen. Shishakli seems like she's gonna be a really fun character, a very likable character. I know people were kind of surprised, like, because when she was cast, the news came out, and people were like, huh, like that's just like such a one moment character in the book. It's interesting that like we got that news, and then she was on the poster, and she's been a little bit more prominent. Which some of that stuff is like contractual, but in just this scene alone, she clearly has like a presence, and she has a fun like banter with Chani, and she's one of the most, if not the most vocal of the Fremen that are in this group watching the worm riding. She yells out to Paul, like has this moment with Chani, which is like the funniest part of the scene, probably. And then there's a back and forth with Stilgar Paul. That's also kind of funny, but also like has a great like weight to it. It's just like very impressive, like tonally, like balancing it, and very different from like almost anything I've seen Villeneuve do. Um, I can think of like some standout moments of like smart, like more subtle humor, like Arrival, and things like that. But I just thought it was so well done in terms of tone, and then in terms of form and the actual like technical elements. I mean, is again, we saw it in IMAX. It was so overwhelming and awesome. And when I say awesome, I mean like truly like awe-inspiring with the way that Greg Fraser, it's, the camera, like there's these longer takes, and then the edits are like very clean cut. And then even with the worm approaching, there's a shot sustained of Paul on the dune watching the worm come forward for like 10 or 15 seconds. I'm just like watching, and it looks so impressive, looks so good. There's nothing about the effects that stands out or looks strange. Um, and then the actual ride in terms of how the sound is incorporated. And again, you're in IMAX and you feel like you're on a roller coaster. There's all these things like moving around you almost. And like I was like ducking down in my seat with the worm, like crashing into the dune. And it was just all so well done. And then, but I mentioned it's very quiet all throughout the sequence. And when I say that, I mean, there's no score really for majority of the scene. But then the way it's like very well like tied in and like kind of rises up as Paul is succeeding and able to mount and ride the worm. I thought it was just such a nice way of incorporating that theme and using that to effect in that particular moment. And like just the release and the elation, and it was just like, if you're a fan of the book and if you're a fan of the first movie, I cannot imagine if the rest of the movie is like this, and not saying in tone or anything, or even just the style or form, but just with the amount of care and thought that is put into it and has the impact visually and sonically and all these things. I mean, this moment was just as good as anything, if not better than anything in part one in terms of how it was handled. And it was just so pleasant. And I think audiences, even if they're not that big of a fan of Dune and are just kind of showing up and maybe they saw it on Max or TV, and decide they want to watch the new one in theaters, I mean, I think people are absolutely going to love this movie. There's a lot of dark stuff. There's a lot of interesting things that we have to see how they play out. But I think having this type of action and these type of moments is just going to do so much. And I thought it was just such a great choice to show as an audience. If you're trying to get people to want to go see this movie or tell other people that they have to go see this movie and rave about it, like this is just nothing else could top this. Not the first 10 minutes. Maybe some other things that are maybe a little too spoilery. I just thought it was a really good idea, really good marketing, tool. And of course, people fumbling over their phones at the end to try and like buy tickets with the QR code. I was like, this is beautiful. And yeah, it tied into like the Sizzle Reel at the end. So it was a lot to absorb. But it was very simple, very well done. I wish we had Garen to talk, because knowing him as well, I just can't. I would love to hear exactly what he thought about it. But I know you guys have plenty to say that I'm sure I missed, but I was very overwhelmed, to say the least.
I have to agree with Johnny. The scene starts off very quiet, and especially like we just got done watching part one. It's a lot to take in, especially like the last 20 minutes. There's the fight with Jameis. Just we see them walking off, the whole desert power. Then, but it's kind of a quiet scene. And honestly, when I saw people walking in the sand, I was like, oh, it's Jessica and Paul. So I was kind of like surprised to see it was Stilgard and Paul, and their interaction is great. Like it's already more comical than anything that we got in part one. And like we saw, I think it was in the first trailer ever, nothing fancy, and Paul's just being Paul. But what's amazing, and I said this a couple times in my head, when I was watching part one again, is Joe Walker's editing, like just the shots, the quietness. And then when Paul finally gets up on the worm, both feet up and has the sand hooks and is riding the worm, we hear Hans Zimmer's music from part one again. And I hope that they keep that same music and they don't change it for the actual film because it brings it all back together again. It brings it back to part one. It brings it back to the scene with the ganja bar. It's just like there's a scene that always gets me in part one. It's when Alito's lying there and Paul gets the ring. I know it's basic editing, but I'm always like, F Joe Walker, man. That guy can edit. Like, they know how to tell a story. And just like that. And also, something that was impressive that we haven't talked about with the worm, the texture on the worm, how lifelike it could look. Because apparently, there is no giant real sandworm. It's a bunch of, shots that hopefully we'll get a cool making of on the 4K or whatever. But it's just how they put it together. I felt it. I felt like I was like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna get the sandworm, right? Cool." I was hoping for something else. But like you, Johnny, I was like, whoa. Like I feel the dust. I feel the sand coming through. You know, it felt really for something that wasn't immersive, it felt immersive. And I hate using that word. It was just so epic and big. And it is. Like anyone that just saw part one was like, oh wow, we get to see him ride a sandworm. And anyone that you talk to about Dune, they'll either tell you the first then I don't get it. It's weird. They use weird words like ganja bar, Benny Jesuit, but everyone knows the sandworms. And I think that was a great way to show part two. Be like, you wanted sandworms? Well, here you go. What was interesting in the showing that we saw, some people left when the credits ended. I mean, as the credits were rolling, like, I'm like, do they not know that there's like a little preview for part two? But, and also, it was just great marketing. And then we got a sandworm popcorn bucket that we'll talk about on the next episode. But
I will
it was, go ahead.
Sorry, so I was just going to add to what you were saying. When you said immersive, that's a really great phrase, even if you don't like to use it, because I feel like and Villeneuve has said this, like with IMAX, there's no, when it's fully expanded, the aspect ratio, there's no like border almost. Like it engulfs like this entire side of a building, basically. And I think that this scene, because I'm not like an IMAX obsessive, like some people maybe, like I don't think it's the end all be all necessarily. It's a great format, especially when it's used well and properly, which, that doesn't happen maybe as often as it should. Dolby is excellent. In terms of sound, you really can't beat Dolby, and Dolby, when they have Dolby Vision, the way they use their projector, it's really fantastic. It's hard to beat. And I would probably recommend Dolby in any instance where you don't actually have the IMAX expanded ratio. However, with this, I was reminded of how awesome it is when a filmmaker, and we didn't have to be reminded that soon after Oppenheimer, obviously, because we all know how incredible that was and how well it was used there. But I feel it reminds you like, wow, this, when you're seeing it like this and does blow up all the way on the screen, it is so like, there's really nothing like it. Cause in terms of scale and how it approaches, like when Paul's standing on the dune and the dune's massive, it takes up like almost the entire screen. And then there's a whole other huge section of the screen that's looking off in the distance, and this worm is taking it up and approaching. There's no other way to like really replicate that. And I think for this scene with the ride and how he gets on the worm and then he's, climbing on top of it, and the sound, and it was just so like immersive, as you said. And I think that I would recommend, I wouldn't have said this necessarily before seeing the scene, but after, I I don't want to like say you have to see it in IMAX, because if you can't, you can't, and that's fine. It's still going to be great either way. But if you can see it in IMAX, I think you absolutely need to try and see it at least once, because it is a different animal, and it's great. And I think that this scene proves that about really anything else.
Well, part one even has that feeling. It's a different film in IMAX. And like you said, when it's used right, it's a whole different world. Like in part one, when we see the worm come up to him and Jessica, just the scale, like you said, it's that building like, whoa, this is massive. Even if you got a 70-inch TV, a 85 LQ, whatever LG's putting out there right now, um, it's still not the same feeling. And seeing it in IMAX, if you can, great. And I get it, some people don't have IMAX next to them, but do yourself a favor, treat yourself, go see part two in IMAX. And we haven't seen it yet. And I can tell you, like, the arena scene, oh my God. Like, I wish I hate that there's a Gladiator 2 coming out, but if they want to re-release the original Gladiator with Russell Crowe in IMAX, that's something you want to see in big epic scales. So, but that sandworm scene, I don't want to say I was pleasantly surprised. There was part of me that's like, oh, that's what okay. I'm happy that we get the scene. Like, I wanted something else, but I think that's what Warner Brothers and Legendary wants, them to show more than anything else. And by the way, I know you talked about Denis, but I just loved how he was like saying, thank you for coming to watch this sneaky preview. And I honestly thought you could see long live the fighters. But when he said long live cinema, I was like, you go, Denis. You're a fan of filmmaking, and that made me even happier than long live the fighters.
And touching on some of those new elements from the Sandworm scene, I think yes, talking what you're mentioning about like with Stilgar and Paul, like it's really cool. They're doing the sand walk, like out a bit further into the sands, and then there's that interaction with them, and there is the levity there. But what I really love about it is it's so natural because Stilgar he's a very serious person, but it's because of that that you feel, there's a bit of humor there with Paul's interaction. Like Paul's smiling, he's just going to be like, play about it. Yeah, yeah, I'm not going to do any dancing when he knows, he's going to like give it his all. So that was really nice. So it makes me confident that we are going to get like a balance throughout the movie. So it's not going to be like that, hard action throughout, but we're going to have those nice moments and showing the relationship between the characters. And that moment with Shish and like Chai, like they're sitting there with a whole group of women and watching. And that was also nice. Like at first, when we heard the description about the scene and we hadn't watched it yet, it was like, okay, what does that mean? Like a feminist taunting Paul, but then actually you see that, it's just like friendly teasing, like don't embarrass us, like, obviously that they're all like close to him and they like him, and they want him to succeed. So that was cool. And it does show that we're probably going to get like more depth to Shishakli. We know that she's going to be at least in this scene, and that scene, I guess, much later in the film when like she's attacked by harpooners. That scene where we saw the Sia logo on the floor in front of us. So it looks like she's going to play a significant role at least in some parts of the film. So yeah, but that was really cool, and just like seeing the whole thing when Paul is doing the run and the Sandworm is coming behind her and the whole dune is basically collapsing, and you see like how basically the Sandworm was like rearranging the landscape. I mean, it's like cinema experience. It just doesn't get better than that.
Yeah, that scene with Shawnee and what's her name? Chachak. I can't pronounce
Shishak.
her. I was surprised that she was there, and I love that Zendaya slash Shawnee looks worried, and you know why now with the blue bandana. It, it's a scene that's very important because of her relationship with Paul and what Paul means to her. Also, I like that Stilgard said Uso. He didn't call him Paul. He didn't call him Wadid. He said Uso. But I like the banner between Zendaya and her. And I like it. Like you said, it was taunting, but it was a friendly, like, come on, Paul, you got this. I believe in you. And I like that it wasn't just in English. I like that we got in Fremen. It made it more feel real than sometimes, like when I'm watching Doctor Who or other movies or shows that take place in other worlds. It's like, oh, it's default to English. Cool. I get it. Why? But seeing the subtitles makes it feel more real. And that's something that was half in English, half in Fremen, but it makes it more realistic that you feel it. And it was just a great scene. And now seeing the Fremen's reactions was also great.
I like what you said, Marcus, about Stilgar and like the humor, like, and that's consistent with the first movie because he is such a like deadpan, like he doesn't have like that bone in his body. So it's just fun when he introduces himself to Duke Leto and they have that back and forth. Like he's not trying to be funny; it just he is because of his the way he is kind of socially awkward. He's in an element that him talking to Paul or him talking to the Duke, like it's just a different environment. So I think that's a good thing to point out. And Javier Bardem looks like he's going to be a highlight. He's probably going to be one of the fan favorites, I would imagine, with his performance and how he rides that line with Stilgar.
Yeah, so I'd say in short, if you're one of the people in the country that hasn't had this event yet and it's coming to your country, I definitely would recommend making it there. Like just seeing the scene alone is worth it, and of course all the other footage and stills that we got. Yeah, then after that, like this wasn't the end of what was shown. So then we got another montage. I would say maybe it was about like 30 seconds or more. And there we got to see a lot more of the final battle. We see like the sandworms, like going over the landscape and heading towards the Emperor's, like his tent base. And there's shots of intense fighting, like in the streets, like in the streets of Arrakeen. And that's something that we didn't see much, like in the first movie about like, the actual streets, like outside of the residence. And then we're seeing like also the fighting going on above with ornithopters in the sky and then explosions. So just really spectacular. And we also see one thing that clarifies a bit that attack on the harvester. So we see that it looks like it's Gurney Halleck who he's at the harvester and he's looking out there and like he's getting ready to fight, and there are these Fremen coming out of the sands. So that's probably like just the moment before like Paul recognizes him and then the real, and so that's gonna be a cool moment coming up there. Um, yeah, then we also saw like two scenes that really stood out to me in Another's montage. So it appears that there's a woman walking on the sands. I mean, you can't really make out who it is. Like, could it be Jessica? Could it be Chani? Could it be a vision of someone in the future? And she's walking on the sands, and there are Fremen bowing down on both sides. Well, I'm assuming it's Fremen, but this is all happening in the sands. So really intriguing. Like at this moment, I have no idea what that could be. I'm assuming it's going to be like a vision, the way it's set up, or like something from the future. But that's it's just showing that there's so much we haven't seen yet. And then we also get like a shot of Paul walking up the stairs with his knife, and that's like already in the final scene inside the Emperor's base, that's tent base construction, and it seems like he's going upstairs potentially to where the Emperor is seated. So could this be like before the fight with Feyd? He's going up to like fight Feyd, or after the fight, he's beat Feyd, and then he's walking up to the Emperor, and he's like, like now it's time for me to take over. So I just can't wait to see those full scenes.
I would love for that scene for him to walk and just be like, get off your chair. Belongs to me. I'm the new boss in town. Yeah, I like that scene. The woman, it could be part of Jessica's vision of the water of life, or it could be Aaliyah's knife vision. Just saying, maybe that's our Aaliyah right there. No, but those scenes were really cool. Um, I'm curious to know how they're gonna introduce the Emperor right away. I mean, there was that description that's in the first 10 minutes of what some people saw, because I started counting how many times they mentioned the Emperor, and it was a lot. So it's kind of very much. I remember when I was in film school, we studied Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid a lot because of the writing and how great it is. And they talk about Bolivia nonstop. We need to go to Bolivia, Bolivia, Bolivia. Bolivia is a city, a country, you know, but finally we see Bolivia at the end of the film. But it's been built up this whole entire time that it is something so important. And the Emperor, I'm sure we'll get early on, but I'm just dying to see Christopher Walken scenes, and just not the your father was a weak man. I want to see more. I'm dying to see some Christopher Walken, and also a special feature of the whole cast trying to do their Christopher Walken impressions. That would be great on Blu-ray release. But the Emperor is, I think what I'm more excited than Faye about part two, and I'm pretty excited about sweet Feyd-Rautha.
Yeah, that a couple things there, Marcus. That vision that you mentioned, it's definitely a vision. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It is very. I mean, it's it is a great example of how much we do not know what we're going to see in this movie, and how much Villeneuve could dig into other elements of this world, of the future, of Messiah, for example. Because it's in the desert, and there's very prominent clouds up in the sky, which we know from part one there are none on Arrakis, obviously, with no water cycle. And then the people bowing, I know you said they were Fremen, and they could be, but they are like, I don't think they were naked per se, but they had like nothing on like their upper bodies or their face. Like they were completely bare, and they weren't wearing a mask or a helmet or any sort of garment. But it was just a bunch of people, like they were almost like black, like very much silhouetted type of figures. And when they were bowing, there was a quick close up shot of one of the figures as it was like as this woman was walking by. And it was almost like the face was like almost distorted with like a scream, like how like wide open the mouth was of this person. So it was a very like kind of, it's a disturbing kind of image. I don't really know what to take from it, but it was very one of if not one of the more exciting moments for me seeing that, because it's such a quick clip, but it was so like, wow, like, dude, I have no idea what that is really, and I'm really excited to see. I don't expect a clear cut answer in the film, of course, but for fans of like the books, I think that at least it'll be very, very, very interesting. And also, there was another quick close up I'll mention: Paul seemingly waking up face down in what looks like wet sand of some sort. So I don't know if that's supposed to be on an Arrakis. I don't know if that's supposed to be a vision. I don't know if it's supposed to be some like another planet. It was a very like a quick like and you'll miss it sort of thing. But we also know in the previous trip that we got an image of an ocean, and we got it in the back of what looks like a Fremen, someone wearing Fremen garments looking out at the ocean. So is that the same thing? Is that Paul in the looking at the ocean, or is that a different person? Is it real? Is it not? Like it, I just love all that that we just don't know. And again, there's going to be a lot of, I think, great, artistic intent with that Villeneuve and Joe Walker will take. And I think it's going to be really cool to see just not all the stuff that's on the surface, like the basic plot stuff, but really like, what does this mean? And we already got some of that in part one. We know that. I think rewatching it, you're just reminded like, oh, they're showing like this, and that's what this is going to be. And like, this is this other person, and like, this is what this could signify. There's a lot of fun, like, Jamis being portrayed as like Paul's mentor or friend, and then he kills him, 20 minutes later. It's like, there's a lot that you can't really read into, or you don't realize how to read into it until like later. It has like a double meaning or something. So, yeah, there's a few quick, like very like puzzling, but very intriguing shots like that. And I'm sure we'll have no shortage of those between Paul and Jessica and maybe Johnny and maybe Alia and like all these other characters that are going to be in different scenarios where that could be a big factor.
When you mentioned the Paul waking up with the sand water scene, I thought that part in the latest full on trailer that we got. I was like, maybe that's a vision. And when like he has his vision, the vision in the tent, when we see him and Chani and some other people, if you look, Jameis, maybe it was the IMAX that let me see it, but you can see Jameis in the background with them. So they're only visions. It is something that will happen, but how does it happen? We've talked about this for hours and hours on the show about Paul's visions, maybe not 100% clear like what he sees, but something close to it will happen. Like when we see his army holding Atreides flags, and we did get to see some new shots with some Atreides flags. Is it the same copy and paste from part one? No, but it is a vision. It is something that we imagine, you know. So it is interesting, and I think Denis has set stuff in motion for Messiah, even in part one when we go back and we'll look at it and see like, oh, I see what you did there. There was the infamous shots also when he's walking with the hood, and we're like, oh, that's a really Messiah shot. Now, is that a vision also of later in the film when he's more confident of himself, or is it actually him walking through Air King maybe at the end of the movie? I don't think the end of the movie is going to end with like a medal celebration like in the original Star Wars when they all get medals. Great, we defeated the Emperor. No, I don't know how it's going to fade to black. I do want the last line of the book to be in there, and I don't want to spoil it for non-book readers. But that's a question also. How does it end? Does it end with a voiceover and we just see Paul walking through the streets of Arrakeen? Is that the last shot? But I think those are all visions. And what's great with the visions is very much like a what if comic book. What if we do this? What if we do that? We don't have to be 100% accurate, but we can show you something that is, what if? What if this happened? And it's funny that you mentioned the whole entire thing with Jameis. I was talking to my wife earlier. She's like, I thought Jameis was going to help him. I'm like, well, he kind of did in his Jameis way. But you think, even reading the book the first time, that Jameis is going to be there and be his still guard eventually. The still guard becomes his still guard.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing with the prejudice. Like Paul is basically seeing thousands of different paths into the future with all like minor and major variations between them, and like only a few like lead true to the way through where they make it true and defeat all their enemies. So yeah, there's a lot going on those visions that serve as a warning, or as just a different possibility to ponder and showing what could happen if they take a different decision. So yeah, definitely a lot to unpack here. I think we could, pick some of these flashes and like maybe deep dive on those. And I think some of them will appear in upcoming teasers as well. So you can look forward to more breakdowns there. So for now, let's go ahead and sign off for today.
Hey, great to be back on the show after a little bit of hiatus. I'm back. Don't worry. Sorry if you missed my face. If you didn't miss my face, well, it's here. So yeah, honestly, you can find me SDaldy, all the social media. I'm super excited to talk about Dune 2. We're finally in the year of Dune 2. We're a month away, even less if you got early showing. It's going to be full Dune mode for the next couple of months here.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better than that. It's going to be just really like a freight train, I feel like, in terms of just the amount of material we're going to start getting: marketing, interviews, premieres, behind the scenes, all types of advertisements that you probably can't even imagine. So keep your eyes out and open. I think you'll see a lot of pretty cool stuff, and we're excited to discuss and break it down. Johnny Sobchak here as always. Thank you for watching, and you can catch me on Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, etc. at Johnny Sobchak, and see you next time.
And this was Marcus Gabriel. You can find me at Marcus's Writing on X and Facebook, and yeah, of course, writing on DUNE.net. And yeah, we're on the home stretch. We're excited to have you join us. Till next time, take care.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.